Now, one of the questions which Muslims always raise up is that no one can compare to Muhammad, and considering the holiness standard of the Old Testament, which was used for the prophets and by Jesus, how are the Hadith and Quran different in relationship to the holiness of Muhammad?
Yeah, this is often a false dichotomy that everybody falls into. The Muslims fall into it, and even lots of Christians fall into it. It's not Islam. It's not Islam versus the Bible. It's not Muhammad versus the Bible. It is whatever we define Islam to be versus the New Covenant. We are people of the New Covenant. We are the Church of Christ. Now, that is who we are. And so that's the paradigm that we're working to. And if you fall into the trap of thinking that it's liberal secular humanism versus the Bible, or it's Islam versus the Bible, then you're going to fall into a lot of problems trying to defend the Old Testament in ways that you don't need to defend the Old Testament. So the reality is it's a square up between Jesus and Muhammad. When you look at Muhammad's example, it's the Andrew Tate paradox. So Andrew Tate became a Muslim because he said he didn't like the degeneracy of the West. But I would just say to him, all that he's done is he's swapped from one kind of degeneracy to another. How is polygamous marriages not just a revised version of sleeping around in a nightclub? How is misyar marriages not just an idea, a legitimized way of having an affair? A misyar marriage, you don't need to. How is the fact that you don't need to tell your first wife that you're having sex with a second, a third, or a fourth wife, or tell any of the wives that you're having sex with 3 other women, not just a legalized form of adultery? Liberals believe in abortion. Muslims believe in abortion. Liberals practice divorce. Muslims practice divorce. Liberals celebrate LGBTQ politics. Muslims, too many Muslims, not all, but they glorify blowing people up in buildings. Right? There's lots of degeneracy within the Islamic worldview that demonstrates the fact that, slavery, for instance, is completely legitimate within the Islamic worldview. Apartheid system based upon religion is legitimate within the Islamic worldview. This is degenerate. What's not degenerate about this? All you're doing when you swap from liberal secularism to Islam is you're just going from one kind of degeneracy to another kind of degeneracy, and that's the Andrew Tate dilemma, because that's what he's done. He's swapped out one kind of degeneracy and he's just adopted another one. I'd rather have the problems that we have in the church with liberalism than have the problems that the Muslim community has with radicalism. Because liberalism, whilst it's excruciatingly embarrassing and whilst it is painfully embarrassing, it's not killing lots of people. It's not advocating for the return of slavery. But radical Islam is killing people and advocating for the return of the slave trade. And so, in terms of critiquing the hadiths, it's using that Jesus model. You shall know them by their fruits. And again, we're not doing a Muhammad versus Moses debate. It's a Muhammad versus Jesus debate. And the degeneracies that Muhammad practiced are not degeneracies that Christ practiced. Muhammad married a child. Muhammad had sex with a child. That's why in the Islamic world, they're trying to lower the age of consent, like they have done in Iraq, to 9 years old. Whereas every other sensible nation in the world is elevating the age of consent. And so, if you want to talk about these moral codes, if you want to talk to a Christian about it, let's talk as Christians. It's not Islam versus the Bible. It's Islam versus the New Covenant. And in the New Covenant, the Old Testament, the Old Covenant is fulfilled, and it is prisoned through the person of Jesus Christ, and it is it takes on a different role that it did in the Old Covenant. And in the Old Covenant, when God was dealing with those people, yes, he was dealing with savages, he was dealing with barbarians, he was dealing with a hard-hearted people. And so he was dealing with savages in a savage world. And that explains a lot of the things that we find savage about it. But the reason we find it savage is because of the New Covenant. It's precisely because of Jesus' elevation of our conscience that we go, no, we don't want to go back to the Old Testament and go back to those Mosaic laws. But the Muslims have their own version of those Mosaic laws that we as Christians think we have something better too. A different covenant, a higher covenant, a new covenant. And so if we're going to have this conversation, let's have it on Christian terms, not on folks Christian terms.